Ladies and gentlemen, distinguished guests and brilliant minds gathered here today, welcome to Designed for People, expert insights on building smarter cities at the World Cities Summit. This event is organised by the UNDP Global Centre for Technology, Innovation and Sustainable Development in Singapore. I'm Vasey, your host for today's journey through the landscapes of innovation that are sculpting our shared future. As we stand on the brink of unprecedented change, this session aims to spotlight the pivotal role that technology can play in every facet of our lives. From the ways we connect, to how we perceive and live in our cities, to the methods we employ, to how to produce food or how we work. Each element is a critical frontier in our collective advancement. Today, we have gathered some of the brightest minds to delve into these topics. Our speakers will explore complex and exciting areas. Artificial intelligence, which redefines what machines can learn. Connectivity, which keeps us connected and linked even when oceans apart. Internet of Things, which connects the once inert. Cybersecurity, which protects the sanctity of our digital lives. And remote sensing, which expands our vision beyond the visible. Each expert will present a brief yet insightful 9-minute lightning talk, offering us a glimpse into the current and future impacts of these technologies. After these talks, our speakers will share key takeaways in a concise lessons learned segment, distilling today's actions into actionable insights. We will then transition to a fireside chat with Professor Cheong Koon Hian, exploring the interplay of technology, people, and urban planning, offering perspectives on how our cities might themselves evolve in this technocentric era. Finally, Professor Chesterman will close our session with his reflections on the day and thoughts on how we might navigate the evolving tech landscape. Thank you for joining us all today. Your presence signifies a shared commitment to understanding and leveraging technology for a better tomorrow. Let's embark on this enlightening journey together, ready to be inspired, to question, and to innovate. To kick us off today, I am pleased to welcome Calum Handforth, Digital Innovation Advisor at the UNDP Global Centre, to share his opening remarks. Please welcome Calum to the stage.
Good morning, everyone. I'll get my face off as quick as possible. So I just want to start the scene today with a bit of context setting. And firstly, thank you all for joining us. It's a real delight to have so many of you here with us in person. I want to start with 3 different graphs to set the story about why we're all here today. So in the past 20 years or so, more than 1.5 billion more people are now living in cities. And this pace of urbanization is happening particularly fast in Africa and Asia. And actually, during the course of our hour and a half together today, more than 7,000 people will move to a city for the first time. That's more than 14 times as many people as you see in this room today. Next slide is about connectivity. In the past 20 years, more than 5 billion people have come online, getting access to information, to opportunity, and to potential prosperity. And again, during the next hour and a half, 25,000 people will come online for the very first time. But they also risk opening themselves up to cyber harms and digital threats, which we'll talk about later on in today's session. And then shifting gears slightly, this time from years to months. In recent months, ChatGPT has had almost 2 billion visits to its platform, a tool that hints at the potential, but also the potential considerations of technology. And at UNDP, actually, we see a really exciting synergy between technology and cities. This photo is from the UNDP Convos initiative, led by our team in Argentina. Convos, which means with you in Spanish, is a network of local shopkeepers who support local residents with getting online and accessing digital public services. So people in the neighborhood are getting online, but are also saving time and money as they no longer have to travel long distances to government offices. Interestingly as well, these shopkeepers end up earning more money because people come in for digital support and they end up spending money in the shop as well. But this urban and innovation synergy is not guaranteed. To look at another technology, about 95% of the global population is covered by mobile internet, but only 55% of that population is using it. 3.2 billion people are not using digital. And we call this the usage gap, which is this light-colored bar on the top. And this usage gap is people who live within the footprint of connectivity, but are not using it because of issues of affordability, of skills, and other issues of exclusion. And actually, this usage gap is 8 times greater than the amount of people with no connectivity whatsoever. And this highlights a really important synergy and intersectionality between cities and technology. We used to talk about, for example, the rural and urban digital divide. But now, in some contexts, a rural male farmer living in a remote part of a country could actually be more digitally connected and more digitally empowered than a woman living in a capital city. So real risks of new types of inequality and new types of exclusion. Part of closing this usage gap is about making technology real and relevant to people, grounding it in lives and livelihoods, and founding it in a local context. And Singapore is a great demonstrator of this. I just want to show you a few examples. For those of you who live here, or if you're walking around at some point this week, you'll come across some of the beautiful shop houses in Singapore, many built over 100 years ago. And many feature ventilation blocks like this, which allow the building to be passively cooled through natural airflow. And these were installed decades before the advent of air conditioning. If we move about 100 or so years later, the teams at NUS and NTU are now looking at actually what does a sustainable tropical data center look like. So they're looking at things like air cooling and other mechanisms to understand how to make sure this critical digital infrastructure, which uses a lot of energy, is still usable and useful in the local context. So although the technology may be new, our ways of working and thinking may not need to be that different. We can blend the old and the new, and we can shape a broad urban innovation toolkit. And this is one of the many reasons why we're here in Singapore. Another part of this is also we need to be led more by tackling problems and less led by technological solutions. And flooding is a really good example of this. Over 90% of the world's urban areas are located on coastlines. So flooding is an existential risk and concern to many, many cities. In that context, we need to look at what does a broad urban innovation toolkit look like. And again, Singapore is a great example for this. The country is using high tech. So, for example, the National Water Agency are using tools like AI and IoT, which you'll hear about from our speakers in a moment, to monitor drainage to prevent overflow. The country is also using more frugal types of innovation, like these portable plastic panels to protect homes, businesses, and critical infrastructure from the risk of flooding. And the country is also using nature-based solutions. So this is Bishan Park. It's a very beautiful park to walk around when it's not too humid. But when it rains, it becomes a human-made floodplain as well. So we need this broad urban innovation toolkit to ensure that we are best using technology to support people and their needs as well. So some of the technology that you'll hear about in a moment is still emerging. The ways of our working and thinking may not need to be that different. We need to ensure that technology and innovation and cities are founded and serve the needs of people. And this is our inspiration behind putting the session together today and getting such fantastic speakers for you all on stage as well, to support you all in thinking broadly about technology and innovation, to ground it in the needs, the realities, and aspirations of people, whether the high tech, the low tech, or the no tech. Thank you.
Thank you so much to Calum Handforth for his insightful presentation. It really sets the scene for us today. In the midst of rapid urbanisation and technological advancement, focusing on people-centred development is essential to improve the lives of city residents. We are now going to move on to the exciting lightning talks of today. As we navigate through today's discussion on the cutting edge of technology, each speaker will shed light on a distinct yet crucial domain. Let's gear up to dive into these insights, sharing with our first expert, Ms. Cha Lee Ko, a trained urban planner from MIT and founder and CEO of UrbanMetry, whose mission is to build better cities. She helps developing cities by providing them with actionable data, analytics, and insights. Ms. Ko will explore the potential of artificial intelligence in our increasingly urbanized world. Ms. Ko, the stage is yours.
Good morning, everybody. My name is Charlie. I'm the CEO and founder at UrbanMetry. Thank you, UNDP, for inviting me today. Today, I have the uphill task of wrapping up AI in 10 minutes. So please bear with me as I attempt to do so quickly. So when I was tasked to talk about AI in the context of cities, I thought about it for a little bit and I said, you know, I have a wide range of policymakers, regulators who are basically new to this concept. So it's good to take a step back and ask the question, what is AI? To do this, I asked my favorite AI, ChatGPT, before the new version, version 4. So this is done before version 4 was out. So what is AI? I asked ChatGPT. And it said, artificial intelligence is something that mimics human intelligence to perform tasks that we used to require human intelligence to do. Things like learning, reasoning, and self-correction. So then that begs the question, what is ChatGPT? To this, I refer to my favorite human intelligence, Professor Silvio Meira, who I met very recently, to understand what is it that powers this new technology, ChatGPT, that we love so much. According to Calum, 1.8 billion people used it, right? So what is ChatGPT? It is a large language model that uses deep learning techniques to understand, summarize, generate, and predict new content. But please take note, it uses huge data sets. So everybody knows that to build a large language model, as its name suggests, you need a lot of data. But I would like to append on Professor Silvio's comment to say that in order to raise a good AI, we need to do it with clean data, right? And this clean data, unfortunately, for emerging cities around the world that is basically developing, and most of Africa and Asia, it is hardly available. So the main data sources that build clean cities database, including public unstructured data, curated proprietary data, and structured data that you can purchase from private sectors, are largely not available today to emerging cities. And without this, it is almost impossible to build good AIs for city planning, to power our builders, property developers, and financiers to build us better cities, right? So why is AI important to cities? To answer this, I would like to draw your attention to this chart from McKinsey that talks about what AI can potentially do, or Gen AI has basically excelled in doing in the last few months. The biggest one that I would like to draw your attention to is data management. So remember, I was just saying that in order to raise good AI, you need clean data. And previously, in order to get good data, you need to get humans to collect the information and process the information. But Gen AI has unlocked our ability to collaborate, decision make, and most importantly, data manage. So how can AI help? AI can help build emerging cities database in what I mentioned just now is a high and daunting task for most developing cities who are resource-strapped at a fraction of previous cost. This is an example of how it has been done here in Malaysia, and we are able to use some of these technologies to build city database where it did not exist before. So to give you an illustration on how it is working in practice, how AI has been able to help us collect this data, this is an AI Harvester's curated proprietary data set that we use satellite to collect. The image on the left, it is a boundary that we specified to the AI. On the right, is a squares that we cut the AI's, the graphics to. And here on the right, we have the AI, one that we call Heimdall, lovingly, to basically count the number of houses in emerging cities where house counts are really difficult to do with humans and very expensive to do. So this is one way that we use AI to do data collection when none exists before. Another one that we have used currently is to look at utilities coverage in rural areas. Like Calum has mentioned just now, some of the folks might have coverage, but are unable to access it based on things like topography, based on things like access to actual areas to access this technology. So you can see the orange dots on the left. Those are homes that basically is out of coverage. We also like AI because it's quirky. So things like ChatGPT will expedite how we use contextual, cultural information to map out what's really happening with our demographics. Here is a Naslima index that I like to use. So what we do is we track the halal and non-halal food establishments to know where the Muslims and non-Muslims eat in the city. This is something that if you use ChatGPT, you are able to map out where the density of your favorite foods are available very quickly without actually going it and mapping it by hand. Another one is all your hipsters, right? So the hipsters are all going for your lattes, your 15, or I don't know how much coffee is here, but in Malaysia it's pretty expensive. So it's like 15 ringgit for 1 cup of coffee, gentrification, things that are bubbling in the layers of your city that was previously not detectable or very expensive to detect without AI. So not only AI is able to harvest the data, but is now able to help you get a context of the cultural movements, cultural changes in the city in a blink of an eye. So thank you very much. That is the end of my talk. And I would be happy to address any questions if everybody has at the end of the session today. Thank you so much.
Thank you so much, Ms. Koh, for reminding us about the importance of clean data over and above the amount of data available. With clean data, and I must say, I'm loving that Nasi Lemak index, we can supercharge our understanding of the sustainable development of people in our world's cities. Now, exploring the vital role of connectivity in our increasingly networked world, Professor Rohan Samarajiva is up next. Professor Samarajiva is the founder and chair of Learn Asia, a think tank working across South and Southeast Asia and has been working for decades with government agencies, academia, and NGO sectors driving inclusive connectivity. Please join me in welcoming Professor Samarajiva to the stage.
Good morning. Coming to these sessions makes one feel a little old. Well, I am old. I started working on connectivity before Calum's graphs started. That was 25 years ago. Those days, we didn't pay much attention to people like you, people interested in urban planning. I remember 2 conversations with the mayor of my city. One was where he was complaining about the visual pollution of the towers that were popping up under my guidance, he thought, for connecting people. I explained to him that, we needed the towers, otherwise we wouldn't be having this conversation, because I was talking to him on my mobile. So during that time, we had a certain common picture. All of us need a story of what we are doing. So my common picture was of people in the city, people in the rural areas, which we cared deeply about, being connected, talking to each other from wireless devices to big towers that would capture those calls and then would move them around using microwave. those little round antenna that we had on top of the towers. So we got that done, I suppose, more or less. I think the data is clear. We got a lot of people connected in Asia, Africa, everywhere. Now, we need a new imagination. We need a new story today, because that story that we had is changing. What is a network going to look like today? Not today. What's a network going to look like tomorrow? Are those high towers that my mayor was complaining to me about really necessary? Can we bring these things down closer to people and get the job done better? So what we are looking at from a technological point of view, from the point of view of providing services for the smart city, are low latency, high volume connectivity for devices that will be carried by people. I assume all of you are carrying devices that are communicating with various networks at this moment, but also by things, by cars. I think we are looking at a situation where cars are sort of connected, well, moving smartphones or something like that. Yeah. All these things will be talking to each other, and they will need low latency, high volume connectivity. Low latency means they need to be able to get the responses back immediately. Some of you may remember waiting for dial tone. Waiting for dial tone. Half the world was waiting for a phone and the other half was waiting for dial tone. We used to joke in my business. Instead of these big towers, instead of these ugly towers, can we not have more fiber, and fiber running through all the common spaces, particularly the streets? Those days, that was a problem for us because, well, obviously, the municipal guys didn't like me, my guys. I wasn't doing any digging. I was a regulator. They didn't like my guys digging up the road. Okay. But we couldn't dig once because we were amateurs. We were not very good at what we were doing. Regulation was new. I had to make up a new word for it in my language to communicate it to people. Common use of cables, of fiber optics, of towers was not the main thing. We had to get competition running, and we couldn't have one company being held hostage by another. But now I think 25 years have gone. Maybe we should take another run at this. We need to give non-discriminatory access to telecommunications infrastructure, but also to street furniture. What is street furniture? People ask me. Street furniture. Not the kind of furniture you have in your house. The lampposts are going to be extraordinarily valuable. Lampposts, benches, have more benches. You can make more money out of it, right? Bus stands, various things like that. And we need to make sure that not one company monopolizes them. We need to have non-discriminatory, cost-based access to all these things. We need to have power coming into these things. And that power could be very attractive in terms of even street charging of vehicles. Let's get that issue of regulation done. Now, what can we do with these things? You can have effective transport management, which we all care about. We can have footfall analysis. That was 10 years ago, my team was working on the kinds of things, trying to generate clean data sets for urban planners using visitor location registries, VLR. We didn't use that. That was too much data for us those days, 10 years ago. But call detail records, CDRs. Every time you make a call, you receive a call, there's some record that is in the phone company. We pseudonymized it. We were using it to give data to urban planners. Of course, this was before that. This was when the buzzword was big data. Now it's AI. Now all this will be fun. But let's also think about the downside of it. The anonymity that was the signature of the big city might be gone. We may be buying things we don't need because of manipulation of desire. The discovery function, serendipity, for which my country is named, serendip, might go back. We need to do some prior conditions to get this done, enabling conditions. Those days, we were able to do most of the regulatory activities at the central government level, telecom regulators. Now we need to work with municipal regulators. And municipalities don't necessarily have the capacity. And we have to work with them. And generally within government, we tend to like fighting each other rather than working together. We have to get over that. We have to prevent the exclusive contracts from being put in. I can remember Timor-Leste had a 20 or 30-year exclusive contract that somebody had given. And we had to work very hard to get that rolled back. We need to get dig once back in the conversation. And we can do dig once back in the conversation only if we have proper planning and if we have good regulation that assures proper access. There are different approaches that can be taken. I think a highly densely populated country that I used to teach in, the Netherlands, has thought these things through. The government is pushing to make sure that non-discriminatory access is the norm. And the data that is being collected is subject to that very complex and onerous regulatory scheme known as GDPR. Now in my country, we got to make some mistakes before we do the right thing. We have an exclusive contract, which is not operational, thankfully. And we are just about rolling out our data protection laws. But we have not addressed the coordination problems. We have not addressed the empowering of the urban planners, the regulators, the municipalities. And I was sad that in the course of this preparation, I think that bill hopefully will be amended. The government came up with a bill which actually does not address these questions. The headline of my article on that said, it doesn't address the future. Does it at least address the problems of the past? Let's address the future. And let's also address the problems of the past. Thank you very much.
Thank you so much, Professor Samarajiva, for that enlightening presentation on the transformative power of connectivity in our increasingly connected world. Your insights not only highlight technological advancements, but also emphasize the critical importance of accessible and reliable connections in fostering inclusive growth and innovation. Now, let's dive in further with Mr. James Tan, the Director for the Smart City Technology Division in GovTech of Singapore and the Director for the Smart District Division in JTC. He supports agencies to develop and deploy IoT and robotic systems and leads a team at JTC that develops the open digital platform, the Smart District Operating System, leveraging digital twin technology for the Punggol Digital District in Singapore. Mr. Tan, the floor is yours.
Hi, good morning, everybody. Thank you for coming to hear me out. Yeah, it's Internet of Things again, but I promise I'll make it a little bit more exciting this time, not just sensors. Yeah, I'm known for just talking about sensors non-stop, so yeah, okay. Before I go on, why is IoT important to Singapore? Why is it important to a smart city? We want to use sensors because it gives us a wealth of information like transport information, climate information, human demographic information, right? So we not only want historical data, but sensor can also give us real-time data. And I think just now Rohan talks a lot about when you connect them, how all this information can be utilize, right? So beyond that, what else can we do? So Charlie talks about AI. In AI, we know that it's important to have good data. And real-time data can also augment real-time data, especially when it comes to master planning and also operations. I think there's a slide that went missing. Sorry, I missed this. Okay, so let me rewind a little bit then. Then why Singapore needs this? Why Singapore needs to become a smart city after having all these sensors, sensor data? Firstly, we have an aging population issue because we have manpower shortages as a result, and we need to take care of the elderly. So how can we use technology? How can we use sensors to improve our bit to take good care of our aging population and improve our manpower situation? How do we address climate change? Just now Calum talks about flooding. Singapore is no different. We have flash floods. And more importantly, how do we remain economically competitive? Because if the city is not smart, why would people want to come to this city to invest? With that, you may say, okay, good, so we need to add sensors, right? So James is at it again, he's going to talk about sensors. But actually, I wanted to challenge you, including myself. Do we always need more sensors? So I've been in this work of asking for more money. Boss, can you give me more money? I need to deploy more sensors. I need to build a sensor platform. I need to do this and that. And my boss will always frown at me. Can you just make do with what you have? And I was looking around. Actually, my boss is right. There's actually loads of sensors already in the city. The building management system, the thermostat in the building management system, can the thermostat tells you something about the climate? Yes. Can the sensors within the car park tell you something? Can the meters in a grid tells you something? Yes. So if you look hard enough, there's already a lot of sensors within the city. In fact, just within JTC Submit, our corporate HQ, when I look hard enough, we found 60,000 sensors. So yes, he's right. I don't need more funding. So if you, and if you were to look at CCTV is actually a very good source of sensors. In fact, we were joking that every single pixel is a sensor. All right. Then after you found all the sensors, what do you do with them? Right? You can connect them. You can integrate them. You can interoperate them. And if you were to go by the traditional way of integration, you will do a multi integration, right? So if you need to connect to 5 systems, you pay 5 service provider, you get it done. But if you have a digital platform, once you connect it to the digital platform, it will remain connected, right? Then the next system, when it comes on board, it will see the X number of systems that is already on. So you don't have to keep paying the same guys. Like for example, I shouldn't quote the company name, but we were trying to get our robots to connect to the lift, and the vendor quote us $200,000, and we were like, what? Then we tried to negotiate, and we paid for that connection. But fortunately, because we connected to a digital platform, the next sets of robot, when it came in, we don't have to pay the lift manufacturer again. So that saves us some money. So in a way, if you have some kind of large-scale integration, a digital platform will actually cut down the cost of system integration. So with that, I like to draw a paradigm to an Android operating system. So Android kind of extract Bluetooth, your GSM module, your touchscreen, and you allow people to build applications on top of the mobile phone. And it becomes very rich. And today, after 10 to 15 years of development, the Android ecosystem, including the Apple iOS ecosystem, there's just millions of applications. And that's what makes the smartphone smart, right? And with that, the digital platform is like the Android OS. If you have a digital platform, it doesn't have to be open. It can be unique to you. But the moment you have it, your building, your city becomes smart. And this diagram was drawn by GPT. If you look at it, the application on top of the operating system, you can get citizens to build an application for the visually impaired to take the lift, because you have already abstracted integration, right? You don't need to get the citizen to talk to Mitsubishi or Fujitsu. The digital platform with an open standard has that covered. Someone who wants to operate a robot within the central business district, for example, the traffic system, the building system, the lift systems are already open standard. So in that case, the operating system provides that capability. And of course, the connectivity and the physical infrastructure is very important. Those needs to be connected as well. Okay, I talked about the possibility. Of course, there are risks as well. Cybersecurity, which later Veron will talk about. The transparency in collecting this data. We collect so much data, especially CCTV. We need to tell people what we use them for. And more importantly, I want to talk about regulation and safety. When we connect the system, say for example, a lift system, when we do the integration, we have to ask ourselves, is it intrusive? What happens if it's got compromised? Does it cause us inconvenience only, or does it cause us bodily harm? So if the integration doesn't override building code or safety code, then maybe some kind of simple integration, like maybe you just integrate to the buttons and then the software just behave like a human being pressing the button. And if that system gets overwritten, get compromised, we only cause minor inconvenience and not cause the entire building to be unsafe. So these are considerations that we can do when we deploy sensors, when we deploy IoT, when we connect them together and try to leverage on it to build applications. So regulatory and safety is important for such consideration in deploying such projects. The last one is, again, funding. So you say, why is James always talking about funding? Yeah, because I've always been going around asking for money. But if you look at how we built the Punggol Digital District, it is a central funded real estate. We decide and master plan it, and then we curate our tenants, and we build it. But that's not the only way that you can actually build a smart estate. You can actually have a public and private collaboration where the government can come up with some innovation, come with some ideas, and then we make a call for collaboration. Companies can come in, and we can co-fund and develop some of these smart ideas. The last one is private. So I had the opportunity to visit Japan, and in Fujisawa, there's a smart town. It's entirely championed by Panasonic. If you have an opportunity to go there, or you have already visited there are a lot of smart initiatives. Every home is smart. There's a smart grid. There's robotics delivery. There's a unmanned store. You can track where are the kids, and they can. There's EV everywhere. It's really safe. So, and is the mayor? Who is the mayor? The mayor is Panasonic. So do we have to always wait for the government to deploy a smart city? I think the answer is no. So with that, I hope I give you some overview about how a smart city can be with IoT applications. And sorry, my face again. Thank you very much, everyone.
Thank you, Mr. Tan, for sharing your insights around the importance of IoT and the interoperability of systems, and how these can be harnessed by citizens who can build applications that improve the lives of residents. Certainly between me and the last three speakers, I'm looking forward to the lampposts in Asia, in Kuala Lumpur, being able to tell me where the nearest and most popular nasi lemak stalls are. Now, switching into the online safety zone. Ms. Veronica Tan is the Director for the Safer Cyberspace Division in the Cybersecurity Agency of Singapore, where she leads the development of cybersecurity risk assess frameworks for organizations. She has published the Cyber Essentials and Cyber Trust certification as national cybersecurity standards. This is a topic which becomes ever more important in today's digital world, especially for smart cities and their governments. Let's welcome Ms. Tan to the stage.
Hi, good morning, everyone. So today's talk, I'll be talking about towards a safe and secure smart city. But before I jump into that, firstly, a recap of what is cybersecurity And I think some of you would already have a mental picture of what you think about when we talk about cybersecurity. It is actually an evolving concept, and let me take you a walk through history, starting with the 1940s, when the theory of the computer virus came about, and that was from John von Neumann, because he came up with the concept of the computer. But that wasn't a big issue then, simply because how many of us had access to large electronic devices in those days? Come the 1970s, 30 years later, computer worms became a reality, and one of the first came with the ARPANET research project, where the computer program replicated. And of course, then after that came the concept of the antivirus to be able to counter the computer virus. Moving on, the 1980s, and that's when many of us went online with the birth of the internet. Through a universal language, the TCP/IP protocol, it connected big communities of users, and guess what? This also led to the spread of viruses and so on. So by the 1990s, cybersecurity has very much become mainstream, and we are today, living in an era of ransomware, high-profile threats, and so on. So we've seen the past history of cybersecurity. What would the future of cybersecurity look like? So 30% of enterprises in Singapore have embraced cloud. And cloud would also have its unique challenges where cybersecurity risk is concerned. So one of the emerging areas, I would say not quite emerging, is really to look into cloud security. Earlier on, James had a presentation about IoT, and in the context of the smart city, I would imagine this expands to smart buildings, where you have buildings with increasingly connected systems, and you would have to start thinking about operational technology security. With all this data put together, we are starting to make good use of them through AI, and Charlie talked about it as well. And AI security becomes an area we need to pay attention to. And finally, in time to come, we would need to think about quantum security as it becomes a lot more pervasive in our daily lives and operations. So I guess the question is, why would cybersecurity be important for smart cities? So a smart city is essentially about connected places. It's about connected communities. But let us try to understand and peek under the hood to see what a smart city really looks like. And actually, in James' previous presentation, he already covered this extensively with the Smart City Operating System. So let me just recap. What you would find in a connected smart city would be connected technologies integrated into your city infrastructure and into your buildings. You would have systems. The systems would contain data. And these will all be connected through various networks. And what does this spell for the adversary? Basically, a wonderful playground for them to play around with and create havoc into your smart cities and into your smart buildings. So I guess the previous presentations have talked quite a bit extensively into different technologies. And if you were a city planner, if you're managing a building, a smart building, a natural question you would have is, how do I actually put all this together in practice to secure and to protect all of them? So firstly, let me take you through a typical digital transformation journey of a smart city and for businesses as well. It typically starts off with the creation of digital assets through the digitization process. And as you deploy sensors, as what James talked about, with Internet of Things, you would have additional data being deployed. Typically, as the number of data sets grow, you would want to put them on the cloud. With the capabilities of cloud helping you with data storage as well as compute, you would be able to then apply automation and intelligence. And all this for certain key benefits to your smart city. Is it in the area of improved productivity for the city? Could it be in the area of innovation? Or maybe it's about growth of the smart city. So if this is the typical digital transformation journey of a smart city, this would be my suggestion of how you would actually secure your smart city. Firstly, with digitization, naturally, your attack surface expands. And this is where classical cybersecurity risk need to be managed with basic cybersecurity practices. With cloud security, with OT risk, basically these are all additional measures that have to be layered on as well. Now, the typical measures of cybersecurity still apply, but whether it's in the area of OT or whether it's in the area of cloud, there would be technology-specific risks that need to be covered additionally. And finally, Similarly, with AI, AI also has its fair share of AI-specific risk. So if you were to layer on all this, starting with a strong cybersecurity foundation, this would be a good way for cities to be able to progressively secure themselves and manage the risk as you adopt new technology areas. So now, in closing, I would like to say that urban cybersecurity is essentially a collective responsibility. And why do we say that? We are now working in a digital world, in a digital era of smart cities, and basically the concept of physical country geographical boundaries sometimes fall away in a digital world. So I think this is where global intercollaboration is important in order for smart cities to work together to share knowledge and exchange about how we should protect and secure our cities. And that's at global level. Now, if I were to distill it further into organization level, where individual organizations managing smart buildings and forming a part and parcel of the smart city, this is where all of us as organizations need to play our part so that we're not just the weak link in the entire ecosystem end to end for the smart city. And finally, if we take away our corporate hats, all of us are individuals, and we are probably quite digital natives by today. So what we would do is we will go online with our various day-to-day transactions. And this is where we too can also play a role in order to basically put together a smart city. So if we were to have global organization and individual level cooperation and collaboration put together, and if we work together collectively, this is where we would be able to achieve urban cybersecurity for our smart city so that we can progress and we can continue to grow and innovate. And with that, I've come to the end of my short presentation. Thank you very much.
Thank you so much, Ms. Tan, for this insightful and crucial presentation to share the importance of collective responsibility for keeping connected communities in smart cities safe and secure from cyber attacks. Now, let's shift our focus to our last but yet very pivotal aspect of technology that helps us understand our environment from an extraordinary vantage point. I'm pleased to introduce our final distinguished speaker, Professor Angel Su. Professor Su is a renowned expert in environmental data and sustainability. She is Associate Professor of Public Policy and the Environment, Ecology and Energy at the University of North Carolina, Chapel Hill, and founder and director of the data-driven Environ Lab. Today, she will take us through the fascinating world of remote sensing. Her talk will delve into how this technology enables us to monitor urban landscapes and atmospheres, providing crucial data that informs everything from climate policy to disaster response strategies. Please join me in welcoming Professor Angel Su to the stage.
Such a wonderful introduction. Okay. Imagine this, an unparalleled bird's eye view of your city, where technology and gravity are no longer constraints. Except this bird is not flying in the sky, it's actually coming from space. From this vantage point, high above the clouds, above the atmosphere, imagine a tool with the ability to gather data and information from every corner of your city, from traffic patterns in busy highways and streets, to water availability in lakes and reservoirs, to the height, shape, and configuration of buildings. This tool allows us to not only traverse space, but also time. We can start from an aerial view, examining water availability in this river here in Pucallpa, Peru. Then we can shift to Dairyland, California, where we see these changing patterns in agriculture and pasture land. And the best part, it's free. Well, mostly, you have to have a computer and also an internet connection. But this is remote sensing, a technology that provides a practical tool and a way of understanding and gathering information to improve our cities, from the big picture down to the smallest detail. It's the science of gathering information about an object, area, or phenomenon from a distance, and this is typically done either through aircraft or a satellite. There are two main modes of remote sensing. One is active, and the other is passive. When we talk about active remote sensing, this typically involves a sensor that can emit energy. If you've heard of radar or LiDAR, this energy then bounces off of objects, and the signals are then returned to the sensor. The second type is passive remote sensing, and that captures energy from an external source, like the sun, and it returns that information then to the sensor, functioning much like a camera. Satellites are really adept at capturing a broad range of information across the electromagnetic spectrum, which I've pictured here in this slide. Human eyes can really only perceive information in this very narrow visible band. But satellite sensors are adept at capturing a broad array of information across the spectrum, from ultraviolet radiation to infrared radiation, even to microwave bands. Take a look at this image here of my previous hometown of New Haven, Connecticut. What do you think these red areas are on this satellite image from Landsat? Any guesses? Not Nasi Lemak. Not Nasi Lemak. It's not heat. I get a lot of guesses about heat, but it's actually trees and vegetation. And that's because these sensors from Landsat are picking up radiation in the near infrared that's coming off of vegetation. Our eyes cannot perceive this radiation, but the satellite sensors can. This is what we refer to as satellite spectral resolution. And in addition to the spectral resolution, satellites can also help us observe data across a variety of spatial scales. And this is really important for cities because it determines how much detail we can actually see. So for example, low resolution data in this big green circle is normally about 100 kilometers per pixel. That helps us get very broad information about weather patterns or atmospheric conditions. So a lot of climate models use this data. But even when we move to a resolution of 300 meters per pixel, this is over here on the right, it's still quite blurry. It looks like an abstract painting. But advances in sensor technology and cloud computing have now improved the resolution of our satellites. And so here, even just at 30 meters per pixel, you can already see the outline of roads and also buildings and trees. So who is doing remote sensing? There is a wide range of government agencies, including NASA in the US. Also, we have the European Space Agency, we have Japan's JAXA. They all operate a constellation of Earth observation satellites that are generating huge amounts of data every day. Here's an example from NASA's EOSTIS program. It produces 12.1 terabytes of data daily on vegetation patterns, on land cover, water levels, urban infrastructure. That's massive. It is equivalent to streaming 3,000 high-definition videos every single day. And that's just one part of one agency's contribution. ESA's Copernicus program generates a whopping 16 terabytes of data per day that cities can utilize. There are also a number of private companies and nonprofit organizations that are also participating in the satellite race. You may have heard of Planet Labs, which is a private company that is producing ultra-high resolution data, even higher than that 30 meters that I showed you earlier. And nonprofits are also joining this race. Environmental Defense Fund, just in March of this year, launched MethaneSat, a global effort to try to better monitor methane pollution around the globe. So why is this important for cities? Well, simply put, remote sensing provides a massive wealth of information and data that cities can use. And this is particularly important in the era where it's incredibly time-consuming and costly. James, I'm sure those sensors are not cheap, and that's why your agency turned you down for more money, because it's not cheap, it's incredibly costly. And that's where remote sensing can provide an affordable alternative. Let me give you an example. This is a map of data that I put from the World Health Organization's air quality database. Cities have to regularly report air quality data to it from ground-based monitors. You probably noticed that data is pretty good in Europe, it's okay in North America, it's also really good in Eastern China, but there are huge gaps for the rest of the world. Now take a look when we use satellite remote sensing data to measure the same thing. We essentially get wall-to-wall coverage of this PM 2.5 air quality data. And not only can we observe across the world, but we can start to compare air quality between cities and also within a city. And not just for air quality, but a range of other environmental phenomenon, including using remote sensing data to model sea level rise risk. It's important for coastal cities like Shanghai, and also urban heat, where you can see how much it actually varies throughout a day in these shadows that are moving. And this functionality is particularly important because we know that people don't live the same way in cities. Cities are sites of inequality. Take a look at this image of Mumbai in India from photographer Johnny Miller's Unequal Scenes project. What's really striking is you have a wealthy neighborhood that is juxtaposed next to a less wealthy neighborhood. These scenes are common all throughout the world. Look at Manila, for example, where you can see that residents living in this much denser part of the town are exposed to higher levels of air pollution and heat because they have less access to green space and tree cover. And so remote sensing can reveal these environmental inequalities. We've analyzed these in our Urban Environment and Social Inclusion Index, where you can see side-by-side maps here of Singapore, and the areas that have the highest levels of tree cover, shaded in dark green, correspond to those that are the coolest neighborhoods in white. So you can see how cities can leverage this technology to then identify where the most vulnerable populations within their city might be, and to specifically address interventions to protect them. Well, how is this technology working in practice? Well, remote sensing is providing a wealth of baseline information to track a range of urban phenomenon. But there's still a disconnect, a gap between satellites and the city. And that's because remote sensing algorithms and models require ground truth data to ensure their accuracy, to make sure the data are clean and that it's not hallucinating and going off the rails when AI is applied. And that can be particularly challenging in rapidly urbanizing contexts or data-poor environments. So here's an example of why ground truthing is important. So this is a picture of Shenzhen in China. And any guesses what this green patch that my orange arrow is pointing to is? Anyone have any guesses? Okay, well, someone already got it. It could be a park. It could also be an orchard. But as Charlie correctly guessed, it is actually a golf course. But it's easy for our eyes and computer models and algorithms to confuse all of them. So this is why ground truth data is absolutely critical to ensure that whatever data, whatever insights are coming from remote sensing actually accurately reflect what's going on the ground. And so there are two main reasons why satellite remote sensing data is challenging to apply in urban decision-making contexts. First, cities need to have analytical capacity. Rohan talked about that. They need to be able to have the financial resources and the analytical ability to appropriately take that information and translate it to actual insights on the ground. Secondly, there are often a clash between satellite remote sensing data and decision-making boundaries. This is an example here in magenta where a satellite remote sensing data has classified the urban extent. And you can see how that doesn't align with London's own administrative boundary. But despite these challenges, cities are already capitalizing on this powerful resource. Phoenix, Arizona is using thermal imagery to identify urban heat hotspots for tree planting and cool pavement initiatives. Venice is using radar imagery and remote sensing to identify areas of flood risk. And we also have Barcelona, Spain, that's using remote sensing to improve commuting patterns amongst its residents. So in sum, you can see that this is a powerful resource that cities are capitalizing on to employ more effective solutions that are also inclusive. Thank you.
Thank you, Professor Hsu, for showcasing in such an engaging way the transformative power and potential use of data collected by remote sensing in and for cities, and how it can improve the lives of urban residents. Now, we've explored various frontiers today, each presenting its own set of challenges and opportunities. Up next, we enter a reflective phase of our conference, a segment we call Lessons Learned, before we end with our fireside chat and closing remarks. In the next few minutes, each of our experts will distill the essence of their presentations into a single key takeaway. This is the heart of what they hope you will carry forward, whether it's a call to action, a provocative question, or a significant insight that can influence how we think, how we act in our technologically interconnected world. Let's hear from our speakers one more time as they share these pivotal points with us. Please, would you join me on the stage?
So I would like to, the good takeaway that you could get from us today is good AI is raised in clean data environments. So don't build an AI with bad data.
What I've got to say is, let's think about rights of way, street furniture, all kinds of infrastructure in terms of well-regulated open access, so that different providers can use it without burdening the city with more digs.
All right, my shot is about staying focused, because in the arena of smart city, it's so broad. If you try to hit everything at one time, you'll be just whacking the mole. So if you have, go for something tangible and then stay focused, that's where you can deliver results.
Okay, so you guys had a technology chalked morning today with a treatment of different technology areas. And I think one of the key concerns of technologists is the worry that people fear technology, not familiar with it, and therefore have a certain distrust around technology. So in order for a smart city to succeed, I would say most important is to actually create people's comfort with using technology, trusting technology, and building that digital trust, which is why my tagline and takeaway for today is really about digital trust as the superhighway towards a leading smart city and a digital economy. Thank you.
So originally I had this: remote sensing gives cities access to unprecedented data at their fingertips, empowering them to tackle challenges more efficiently and develop more inclusive solutions. But it's too long. I should have used ChatGPT to come up with a better one. And I was inspired by James, so I want to scratch this and I want a new one. Every sensor is an opportunity, or every pixel is an opportunity, because you said every pixel is a sensor. So I want to change mine to every pixel is an opportunity for insight and action. So thank you, James.
Thank you. Thank you to all of our speakers for their concise and powerful takeaways. As we continue to digest these rich insights, we now transition into a segment that brings the realms of technology and urban planning into an engaging dialogue. I'm thrilled to introduce our next discussion, a fireside chat featuring the esteemed Professor Cheong Koon Hian, a renowned expert in urban development, currently the chair of the Lee Kuan Yew Centre for Innovative Cities at the Singapore University of Technology and Design, sharing with us her experience as her former CEO of URA and HDB and many other important roles. Professor Cheong will explore how technological advances are fundamentally reshaping our cities and communities. Moderating this conversation will be Gulnaz Beg, Executive Director of Angsana Council. With a strong background in technology and policy, Gulnaz is driving growth and prosperity in Southeast Asia through her non-profit organization. Together, they will discuss the integration of technology in urban planning, the challenges it presents, and the opportunities it holds for creating sustainable, efficient, and livable urban spaces. This is a conversation that promises to blend visionary ideas with practical solutions, directly impacting how we live and interact with our urban environments. Please join me in welcoming Professor Cheong Koon Hian and Gulnaz Beg to the stage for what promises to be a thought-provoking conversation.
Okay, thank you very much. Firstly, I'd like to say a big heartfelt congratulations to UNDP and the World City Summit. I thoroughly enjoyed myself yesterday and this morning, and hopefully you find a lot of meaningful takeaways from this morning's session. Professor Cheong, it's an honor to share the stage with you, with your vast experience and expertise. I think this morning we heard a lot about how technology is developing really, really, really quickly. From artificial intelligence to sensors. I will not forget sensors. I'm going to go home and check how many sensors there are around my estate. To remote sensing. It can feel a bit challenging and daunting to think about how to make sense of all of this. So today I'm very proud to have Professor Cheong, who can bring her real-life experiences and expertise to help you think about how to think about technology as an urban planner. So Professor Cheong, maybe we start from there, right? Given that technology and innovation is evolving very, very quickly, it's a challenge to keep up to date. It's a challenge to think about what is meaningful for you as an urban planner and developer of cities. How did you, in your experience, think about adopting technology, adopting digital solutions to genuinely address the challenges that your city was facing?
Thank you, Gulnaz. Good morning, everybody. It's really great to see such a big crowd. There are a lot of people standing behind, but I think there are a couple of chairs in front. I'm wearing my hat as the organizer for CLC organizing this conference. Just a couple of chairs, so those who are bold enough to sit at the front, you might want to try and fit in, otherwise you'll be standing. But thank you very much for having me. I was wondering why I'm here, because I'm not a tech expert like everybody else. But I speak as a user and an adopter of technology in the work that I do. And, there are two very important phenomena that's happening in the world. It's actually quite obvious. One is rapid urbanization, because we say more than half of the population of the world are now in urban areas. And the second really is digitalization. I think about half or more of the people in the world now have access to the internet, although not equally. I think that's the problem. So I think in the experience, my own experience of navigating this world of the smart city, I remember in the actually Singapore haven't started on this journey for that long, I still remember in 2014, when I was HDB, we actually led a huge delegation to Europe to have a look at smart cities. And at that time, in the early days, I think, of the smart city, it's very tech-centric, right? And I was, as an architect, I was very enamored because I spent a lot of time in Barcelona looking at lampposts. That wonderful lamppost that we try to incorporate everything into the lamppost, the sensor, the cameras, and how do you design the lampposts that look beautiful with all these things mounted on them. So we were very, very focused on sensors, on IoT. How do we put in ICT into infrastructure? But the thing with this is that it then becomes quite fragmented, because you divorce the thinking about smart cities from community, from policy, and then there became a shift, right, from a very tech-centric smart city into a much more human-centric smart city, and it's a good move. And so now we think of smart cities in a far more holistic way. So what does that mean? It means that you really need to know, why are you deploying technology?
So you're serving the needs of the people first, instead of just looking at the technology and say, hey, here's a brand new technology, let's think about how we can put it in place.
Exactly. And I think it's a much more holistic approach. You start with what people need. You don't start with the technology. I know there are a lot of consultants here. I get pitched all the time on the type of stuff you can sell to me, but I think that's the wrong starting point. The question is, what's the need? And if you are a decision maker, and particularly politicians and people who make decisions, it's very important to know why you're deploying that technology. So I think that's the first point. And second point is really context. You also need to understand the context you are in order to deploy technology. Every country is different, every city is different, demographics, culture, it's all different. So I think context is the other very important point in application. And it is also about economic context. Can you afford it? I had a conversation yesterday with someone who kept asking me, so what technology should I deploy? I have this, I want to reach a developed country status in 20, 25 years. I think it's a great aspiration. But maybe that is not the question to be asked, you see, as a start. So technology is always only an enabler, so it's contextual.
Okay, so think about the need of your people, of your community. Think about the context within which you're in. Do you also need to understand the technology, or the limitations of the technology, the potential of the technology? Because it can be pretty interesting to explore the various types of technology that's available out there. And we know sometimes when we're pitched, we're sold the story of what it can do, but not necessarily the whole scale of it.
Absolutely. So, Gulnaz, you're right. So the other point really is human-centric. It's about being contextual. The third is about digital leadership. Whether you like it or not, Rohan was saying, you're old, so am I. We are in a different generation. But we need to learn and we need to find out about what technology can do for us and what are the pros and the cons. So I must say, in my own journey, I learned a lot. I had to keep learning. Taught by a lot of my colleagues who are much more plugged into technology because we have to decide how to use it. So that's important for digital leadership. I think leaders need to understand technology, the pros and the cons, so that you know how to apply correctly. So you're right.
Okay, just to bring this to life a bit more, you know, the Housing Development Board, for those of you who are from out of Singapore, is a wonderful innovation of this country. It started off as a program, or as a project rather, to house, you know, to provide low-cost housing. But over the years, it developed, and today, up to 80% of the population lives in HDBs, of which 90% of them are owned by the owners themselves. So it's a wonderful innovation given the demand on urban land in Singapore and the constraints that we have. And Professor Chong, you were CEO of HDB for about a decade. And during that time, you know, you put in place a lot of initiatives blending sustainability and smart features in HDB towns. Could you reflect on some of this? So what did you put in place? How did it bring value?
Well, HDB houses something like 80% of the resident population in Singapore in over, I think by now, 1.15 million flats in 26 towns, right? This is a very unusual organization. It impacts everybody's lives. When the idea of a smart city and smart applications came into Singapore, I think we asked ourselves, so how do we apply smart technology to meet our own goals and mission? So it's very important for us to understand what our customers want. So maybe I use the HDB journey to illustrate the points I was highlighting just now. I think it's, what are you deploying the technology for? We have to be quite clear, you know. So one of the things we did is actually not the smart technology, is to map out the journey of our customer. Many of you are my customers. So just think, what do you do? First thing is, I know you need to find out information before you buy a flat. You need to know where to go. So that mapping out using design thinking is important. And then there's the process of buying the flat, choosing the flat, moving into your home, and when you've settled down, what do you need? You need a car park, you need some of these other things, and then you file to me lots of complaints about your environment and your home. I may get a lot of appeals from you because you have trouble paying your mortgage, and finally, of course, you may sell your home, right, when you decide to move elsewhere. So we actually did a lot of design thinking to map the journey of the customer. That's the most important part. Now, so in the deploying of technology, I will look at just the planning of the town first, all right? So we look at, for example, planning. So in using digital technology, we do a lot of digital twins that help us to plan in such a way such that we improve the performance and the design of the town. With climate change, it is very important for us to model the town at a much more macro level and not just look at the individual building design, which you can also model, right? Because then we attract a lot of good wind flows, we capture the wind flows, and we try to cool the town so that the cooler the town, the less you will use your air conditioning. And we know the heat maps that was shown here, and we can model the heat, and we put a lot of the playgrounds in the shade. But the best part of the heat we would use to place solar panels. So all these are really, really very important. When, I think, was it last week or 2 weeks ago, the Bidadari town won the Gold Fiapsi Award, the international award for its master planning for a public housing town. So I'm really proud of HDB. And we actually deployed a lot of these instruments in the design of the town. Now that's smart planning. Then there is smart estate. HDB has to help the town councils manage over 1 million flats. So your facility management becomes absolutely important. So sensors, the thousands of sensors, and before I left HDB, we were putting in a lot more sensors into the lifts. Because the lifts are made, I'm just citing one example, the lifts are of all makes from all suppliers, and we don't have enough of the data. But by putting in a lot of sensors, we now are able to tell, we can even predict potential failures before it happens, before you send HDB all your complaint letters. And we also know the make of the lift that performs well and which one do not perform well. So it will help HDB to procure the right type of lift. So this is just an example. Smart lighting, all right? What does it mean? When you drive in a car park, as you drive, it's not just that it's like a typical sensor. When you drive, it switches on, right? But this smart lighting, for example, can predict the path of the car. It only lights up as the car moves. Otherwise, you know, you're used to going to the toilet, it just switches on, right, the light. But this is cleverer than that. So you can save a lot of energy. So this is more about the smart facility management. The third is, that I want to mention is smart living. We have an aging population, so if you put sensors in the home, you're able to actually detect if a single elderly is living at home. If they fall down, there's a certain pattern where we learn about their movement. So if your parents, I mean, all the children are working, the parents wake up every morning at 9, they will go to the toilet, they will go to the kitchen. What if there's no movement? All right, so sensors can immediately send a message to their caregivers to say, please call home and check on your parents or your mom, or your neighbor can come and knock on the door. So I think with an aging population, these things would be very important. So I mean, these are some of the ways in which we look at smart technology, but there's also the community element. We are developing platforms that connect the community. So I could go on and on, but these are some examples.
Yeah, but I like how when you talk about the examples, you're actually pointing out very clearly how you are managing some of the challenges that we are facing as a society, right? A population that is getting more grey, dealing with climate change, energy-related issues, you know. So when you're talking about technology, you're actually talking about how it helps deal and mitigate some of these challenges. Now, it sounds like Singapore has done such a great job in terms of thinking through how to get it done in terms of leveraging technology for urban planning. But you know, I used to be in public sector. You've been in public sector for a very long time. One of the things that I think we're good at is not necessarily getting it right from the get-go, but adapting and understanding the context itself. So perhaps my last question to you is, you know, in terms of thinking about leveraging technology, in your experience, what have been some of the key enablers for institutions to adjust to change, to think about how to leverage technology and innovate?
Yeah, I think the institutional level actually reflects also a national level, right? So again, I cite the example of HDB. How many of you every year in your departments that you work in, you would submit a budget and say, we want to computerize. That used to be the word, right? Now you want to digitalize. But that is a very fragmented way of looking at things. That's why I say a very holistic approach is important. So in HDB, we realized that you use digitalization to streamline your processes and to actually almost force a relook at your processes. So in HDB, when we introduced the digital master plan, I see my colleagues sitting there, we got every department to look at their whole entire process. Remember, we did the mapping through design thinking of all the processes. So when you map, you have to come together, and when you digitalize, not by department, but by process and by function, that you need to deliver to the customer. It forces all the departments to come down and sit together. And we mapped up something like 592 processes that we had to change arising from digitalization in a very coordinated way. Now, it's a very difficult exercise because there will be conflicts, and this is reflected also at national level. Nobody wants to change the way they work today, but with digitalization and streamlining, people do have to change the processes. So you do have to have in place a system whereby you need strong leadership, and there has to be some form of sometimes a conflict resolution. Who do what? Who must change, right? Who is going to come up with the data? Who will be the trusted source of truth of data? Because data is not clean, right? So at a national level, this happens too. Certain agencies will be in charge of certain types of data because they're a better source of truth. So within an organization, it's the same place, the same thing. And so we centralize all the data. So that's why institutional change is possible if you do and you use digitalization in the right way, in a very coordinated way. I'll stop there.
No, Professor Cheong, I could go on hearing you for probably the whole day, given your wealth of experience and expertise. I mean, just from this last point, two key things: leadership and a strong, structured, systematic process of change management when you're thinking about digitalization. Thank you very much, Professor Cheong. Thank you, everyone. I hope you enjoyed the session.
Thank you so much, Professor Cheong and Ms. Baig, for that short but invigorating fireside chat, underlining the importance and centrality of people. Finally, to encapsulate and reflect on the insights shared today, and to underscore the crucial role of interdisciplinary collaboration in leveraging technology for societal benefits, I am delighted to welcome Professor Simon Chesterman to the stage. Professor Chesterman is a distinguished voice in the realms of law, technology, and international relations. His closing remarks will not only recap our journey today, but will also highlight the significance of continued dialogue and cooperation across different fields of expertise. Please join me in welcoming Professor Simon Chesterman.
Thank you so much. It's a great pleasure to be joining you this morning, although I was a bit intimidated by the agenda because with lightning talks and a fireside chat, does that mean I'm the lawyer here to rain on the parade at the end of proceedings? It's been a wonderfully curated and really inspirational discussion. And I thought I'd organize some remarks around three basic concepts that I'm at least taking away: data, governance, and people. So in terms of data, there's this metaphor that's often used of the information economy, that data is the new oil. The Economist had a front cover some years back of Google, Meta, Facebook extracting data. And there is this sort of compelling aspect to that metaphor that data enables a lot of what we've been talking about today. It enables a lot of what artificial intelligence will achieve into the future. But the problem is that the metaphor is wrong in almost every sense. Because oil, you have to pay to extract it, you can only use it once, and there's a finite amount of it. Whereas data is essentially infinite. People give it to you for free, and you can use it over and over again. But data, nonetheless, is fundamental to some of the transformations we've been talking about here. But to get it, to use it effectively, you need to curate it properly. And so one of the things I took away from this was that there are a few problems with our access to data in terms of missing data, misused data, and missed uses of data. In terms of the missing data, I think it's important to stress from the outset that there are whole sections of the community that are excluded from this conversation. There is something like 750 million people without access to stable electricity, around 2.5 billion people without access to the internet. But as Calum and Rohan highlighted, there is an expanding access to these people and to the number of people who can be included. But with that as a caveat, there are also questions about misuse of data. And that's not just in the sense of that data being stolen or extracted, the kind of cybersecurity aspect that Veronica was highlighting, but also inappropriate use of data. And with my lawyer's hat on, I like in an environment like this to check whether people are actually reading terms and conditions. So just in terms of misuse of data, put your hand up, literally put your hand up, if in the last year you have clicked I accept to terms and conditions for some use of your personal data on the internet. Okay, keep your hand up if you read all those terms and conditions. One of you is lying. But so I've written books on data protection. I don't read them. In fact, there was a company that recently included in its terms and conditions, if you tell us that you've read this to this point, we will give you a bottle of wine. And it took, I think, 3 months for someone to claim that. So there's a concern about misuse of data. That our data might be used in ways that are discriminatory. I think we're all familiar with the phenomenon of AI bias and so on. But there's also, and that came out strongly in the presentations earlier, the danger of missed uses of data, missed opportunities, that for all the information that's available, as Angel highlighted with that beautiful presentation, James in terms of the collection, and Charlie in terms of the need to make sure that the data is clean, the data that's available we're not always using effectively or efficiently. And so I think that's one of the key things that at an event like the World City Summit, we can look at ways to better utilize, more appropriately utilize the data that's available. And that brings me to my second area of comments, which is governance. And within AI Singapore, I have the role of overseeing the governance pillar. And we look at this in two senses. We look at it in the sense of trying to ensure that the security, that the technology is trustworthy. And I think that's a pretty understandable set of areas in terms of governance, but also that people will responsibly engage with it. And so as we think about governance, we often think about accountability. And it's striking that around the world, discussions about accountability, in particular about AI governance, have been taking off. The problem is that there's a mismatch. There's a mismatch between those with interest and those with leverage. So many of these conversations about AI governance come in environments where there's little leverage to do anything about it. And if you think in terms of a spectrum, those with the greatest leverage, those with the greatest capacity to govern the use of data, the collection of data appropriately, are often the technology companies, which may have the least interest, whereas those with the greatest interest, civil society organizations, international organizations like the UN, including UNDP, have a lot of interest but little leverage. Stuck in the middle are countries, and countries, it's been striking to see over recent years, are really grappling with the governance question, and grappling with them in a couple of ways that I'll describe as whether, when, and who. The first question is whether to regulate. And I can tell you in an environment like Singapore and Malaysia and some of the other countries we've been talking about, the question about regulating the use of this suite of technologies we're broadly talking about, there's a concern about under-regulating, if that means that you expose your people to risk. There's also concern about over-regulating, if it means you drive innovation elsewhere. We also worry about when to regulate. There was a book written more than 40 years ago, The Social Control of Technology, where David Collingridge posited what's now known as the Collingridge dilemma. And this is the dilemma that as the sort of technologies we're talking about at this event roll out, at an early stage of innovation, it would be easy to regulate them, but you don't know what the harms are. As time passes, those harms, those risks become clearer, but the cost of regulation go way up. You can think about this in terms of social media. If you could take a time machine back 20 years, you could have regulated Facebook, you could have regulated Twitter, but back then we didn't know about teenage anxiety and depression. We didn't know about Cambridge Analytica, misinformation, disinformation, information in affecting electoral campaigns, among other things. Bring it forward to today, it's very hard to regulate these things. So that's the whether and the when question. Then there's also the who question. And technology companies will be vital partners in this. And many of them have adopted important principles, important statements of intent. The issue, of course, is what happens when the rubber hits the road. And even the best of intentions on the part of technology companies, I think most of them would accept that they shouldn't be left to regulate this space alone. So countries play a key role. Only countries have the regulatory hammer, the ability to enforce rules, to keep these organizations in line. But as I said earlier, many of them are wary about driving innovation elsewhere. And so that's where I think organizations like the UN, UNDP come into the fore, hopefully providing at least a coordination framework and possibly discussions about global red lines. The last thing I want to touch on is people, and I think this really came through in Kun Heen's presentation at the end. It's amazing someone like Kun Heen even now sort of expresses a degree of imposter syndrome, saying, well, why am I here? I'm not a technology person. And I would say that's exactly why it's so important that someone like her is here. Because there's a danger that if you approach these questions of designing cities through the lens only of technology, you're like someone walking around with a hammer looking for nails to hit. And I think one thing that came through in that final exchange is the importance of demand side rather than supply side thinking about designing cities. We need to think about the purpose. We need to think about the purpose, which is for people, for communities, to bring them together. And so that brings me to my conclusion, which is a couple of takeaways echoing some of the things that were said in the lightning round, and then hopefully my own spin on it. And I do think you go away from today remembering that every pixel is a sensor, every sensor is an opportunity. But as you design these systems, as you think about them, think about who they are designed for and how you might measure this. And don't think about it in terms of the best experience of living in a city. Think of it in terms of the worst experience of living in a city. Think about how cities can serve the last, the lost, the least. There was a philosopher, John Rawls, who said that one idea of a society, a just society, is to think if you were designing society, and to this we could say designing a city, you were designing a society or a city and you did not know what role you would fill in that society. You would not know whether you would be a millionaire or a pauper, a governor or a governed. You would not know whether you'd be a man or a woman, black or white. Design that society with that veil of ignorance. And if we can design cities like that, where we'd be happy to fill any role from a street sweeper to a CEO, then we will have done our job correctly. So ladies and gentlemen, thank you very much. Thank you to our panel. Thank you to the organisers. And I look forward to catching up with you over coffee and finding more about how we can design cities for people together. Thank you all very much.
Thank you so much, Professor Chesterman. Ladies and gentlemen, as our time together comes to an end, I want to extend a heartfelt thank you to each and every one of you for your participation and attention throughout today's sessions. It has been a privilege to navigate these discussions with you, exploring the profound impact of technology on our society and our future if people are placed at the core of our thinking and action. We very much hope you leave here inspired and ready to contribute to the advancements in your own cities and communities. On behalf of all our speakers and the organising team at the UNDP Global Centre for Technology, Innovation and Sustainable Development in Singapore, thank you so much. If you would like to hear more about urban innovation and more specifically about the role of female leaders in creating future cities, please join UNDP's second event taking place just after the break at 11 a.m. in room 331. We very much look forward to welcoming you back to our future events, wishing you a wonderful rest of time at the World Cities Summit. Thank you very much.